Temple of Solomon today. And I don't know if any of y'all are old enough, many of y'all are not as old as I am, to have read the old pulp adventure comics of back in the day, like Alan Quatermain and King Solomon's Mine, right? The Masons like track their stuff back to Solomon. When you think about worldly greatness, Solomon was it in the eyes of God. Who was the greatest king thus far? Saul, David, or Solomon? David. Why in God's eyes is David the better king? Is that? That's right. His heart was for God. And I think, unfortunately, Solomon's heart wound up being for Solomon. But David's heart was always for God. And though he came from humble roots, and though the kingdom did not have the fabulous wealth or even peace that it experienced under Solomon, from God's perspective, David was it. I was talking to a good friend of mine this week about the story of Solomon and David and all that, and he said to me that he thought that Solomon prayed the second best prayer, right? Asking God for wisdom. He said, I think a better prayer that Solomon could have prayed would have been this: give me a heart like my father David. God commended Solomon for asking for wisdom. When he asked for wisdom, he did so because he said that the task of ruling these people is too great for me. What happened, and this happens, unfortunately, it happens too frequently. Someone is empowered by God to do great things. And as they accomplish, they forget that it was God who made it. This still happens in Christian culture today. I mean, you see this with musicians who get famous making praise music, and then they kind of get jaded and they walk away from God. And you see it in megachurch pastors who wind up in scandals, or who wind up saying things, or who just stop preaching the gospel. And I'm sure, at whatever level of success you're at, the temptation's always there. And what David had going for him, that Solomon did not, was that David's heart was always for God. And so, God says, y'all are prosperous, but you're also a spiritual mess, and I can't let that go on. I am taking the kingdom away from you. Well, I'm taking the kingdom away from Solomon. But because I love David so much, I will still give Solomon a throne. By the way, how long does the throne of David last? It gets passed to Solomon, right? How long does it last?
Well, I mean, if you're looking from a earthly point of view, it ended in 400 something BC.
Okay, yeah.
But then if you're looking from a heavenly view, it's Jesus Christ.
That's right. So, the love and blessing of God on David says that someone will sit on his throne forever. That someone from the line of David, from the tribe of Judah, that sits on the throne forever is in fact Jesus. And so it is a mercy that Solomon's left to rule. It's a mercy that God does not take the full kingdom away from them. And I want you to keep that mercy in mind. We'll talk about this more in a little bit. All right? 35. Is that where we left off? I think that's right. But I will take the kingdom out of his. So he says, I'm going to leave the kingdom in Solomon's hands for the sake of David, but I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and will give it to you, 10 tribes. Yet to his son I will give one tribe, that David my servant will always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I've chosen to put my name. And I will take you, and you shall reign over all that your soul desires, and you shall be king over Israel. And if you will listen to all that I command you, and will walk in my ways, and do what is right in my eyes by keeping my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, I will be with you, and will build you a sure house, as I built for David. And I will give Israel to you. And I will afflict the offspring of David because of this, but not forever. So that is a private oracle given to Jeroboam. Okay? Ahijah and Jeroboam went off and they had this little conversation. So far, so good, right? Solomon sought, therefore, to kill Jeroboam. We'll finish that verse in a moment. Process this with me. Why does Jeroboam believe he is going to take over 10 of the 12 tribes? Why does he believe that? Somebody speak up. God's prophet told him. If we haven't talked about this in a while, I will remind you. The job of a prophet is not to make pronouncements, right? The job of the prophet is to listen to what God says and deliver that message with as much accuracy and honesty and power as it can, right? So when the prophet speaks, it's his mouth, but it's God's words, right? So even though he wasn't present, somehow that word reached Solomon. His response is not repentance. It is not God's right. Let's tear down these altars. Let's call for a fast of repentance. Let's turn our hearts back to God. No. Solomon's response to God saying, I'm taking the kingdom away from you because you become a pagan, is to go, well, let's just kill the guy God picked. Solomon sought, therefore, to kill Jeroboam. But Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. It seems to be a little bit of a pattern, right? Happened to Jeroboam here. Happened to Jesus when Herod was out to kill him. In some regard, you could say it's similar, I guess, to Moses as well, as he was in hiding in Egypt. And he didn't leave. Yeah, he was already in Egypt, but he was in hiding as an infant. All right, so Jeroboam waits it out until Solomon dies. Here's what it says, verse 41 and following. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, all that he did, and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the acts of Solomon? To which I say, I don't know. I don't have that in my Bible. Although, I do kind of wonder if maybe that's not a compendium of like Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and, you know what I'm saying? Like maybe that was a collected volume of books we do have. I don't know. And the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. And Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, his father. And Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his place. Now, well, it's fine. All right. So, got a picture of what's going on before the death of Solomon. This is right at the time of his death. I want to flip over and read the account that comes out of 1 Chronicles 10. So you can flip on over. We're just one book away, I guess, right? Was it 1 Kings or 2 Kings? No, it's 1 Kings. So we got, just skip over 2 Kings and you're there. 1 Chronicles chapter 10. All right. So starting on verse 1. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Okay, so Solomon died. Rehoboam's being coronated, right? Coronated? Does that sound right? Yeah. It's being coronated. And so all of Israel, nothing's divided yet. Right? This is still all 12 tribes. They all come to make him king. And as soon as Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard of it, for he was in Egypt, where he fled from King Solomon, then Jeroboam returned from Egypt. And they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all Israel came and said to Rehoboam, your father made our yoke heavy. Now, therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you. We think about Solomon as being a good king and a prosperous king, and under Solomon, there was much wealth. I don't think it's in our reading today. I remember reading it in preparation for this, but I don't think it's in our reading. It said that in Israel, silver was as common as stone. I mean, boy, that's a picture, isn't it? But wealth isn't enough. The people felt crushed. Taxes, maybe. The forced labor, certainly. Solomon accomplished a lot, but he did it sort of by the force of his character and the force of his fame and through his own savvy. But the people were worn out and used up. And so what they asked for was we've been pushing hard under Solomon, and we're tired now. You just ease up on us. And in that crowd, perhaps as a spokesman, is Jeroboam, whom God said, I'll give you 10 tribes out of 12. And Jeroboam says, if you'll just ease up on these people, we will serve you. Rehoboam said to them, come to me again in 3 days. So the people went away. Now, probably he's doing something smart there. He's taken some time to consider it, and he's going to seek counsel about it. Not giving a snap decision, probably the right move. Let's see how it goes. Yes.
He was aware.
Yeah. I know a lot of y'all couldn't hear on the mic, so I'll just share it. Mike said, remember in Ecclesiastes where Solomon was talking about don't speak bad about the king because you never know, a bird might hear it and carry it to the castle. And that definitely seems to already be happening, right? How did Solomon know about the prophecy? And to Mike's point, he's like, people probably were grumbling about him. People were probably unsatisfied by what they were doing. All right, so, verse 6. Then Rehoboam took counsel with the old men who had stood before Solomon his father while he was yet alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer these people? So this is the old guard. They're veterans. They've been around a little bit. They said to him, "It will be good to this people and please them and speak good words, if you will be good to this people and please them and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever." Show them kindness. Show them love. They're asking for mercy, and if you show them mercy, they will love you back. I would like for you to consider for a moment what biblical kingship is supposed to be like. As far as I can tell, you basically get two extended pictures of what it looks like. We get some other brief ones throughout Chronicles and Kings. There are good kings and bad kings that come up and whatever. But the two big paradigms we have, three maybe. Moses wasn't actually a king, kind of Moses. David, for sure. And of course, Jesus, right? All three of those, the picture of leadership is as a shepherd. The job of the shepherd is to care for the flock, protect the flock, make sure they are well fed, well watered, well protected, moving where they need to go. That's what shepherding looks like. David was a shepherd before he became king. Right? Jesus calls himself the good shepherd. And of his people, he calls us his sheep and his flock. Right? What kind of shepherd will Rehoboam be? The advice of the experienced is to be kind and loving to your people. Verse 8. But he abandoned the counsel of the old men gave him, and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and stood before him. And he said to them, "What do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, 'Lighten the yoke that your father put on us'?" And the young men who had grown up with him said to him, "Thus shall you speak to the people who said to you, 'Your father made our yoke heavy, but you lighten it for us.' Thus shall you say to them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's thighs. And now, whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions." Now, consider for a moment. The men who were adults serving under Solomon would have been young men and children under David. Yeah? So they would have seen both. The young men taking counsel right now maybe never had David as a template. These guys grew up. So if you grew up in the time of David as king, there was struggle and hardship and warfare and difficulty. And the kingdom was growing. The people who grew up with Rehoboam, they grew up in comfort and luxury and probably didn't know what hardship really was like. I mean, you see it, right? So their answer is, no, don't shepherd these people. Devour them. One thing I'll point out to you. The advice of the old men in this case is that it's empathy. Right? These people are people like we are. Show them mercy, they'll give you love. The perspective of the young men is that these people are yours to do with what you want. These people are a resource for you to use. It's dehumanized. It's there's an elitism, right? So Jeroboam needs better friends. Verse 12. And so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king said, "Come to me again the third day." And the king answered them harshly, and forsaking the counsel of the old men, King Rehoboam spoke to them according to the counsel of the young men, saying, "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions." I think there's probably something worthwhile here, seeing Rehoboam's choice. I know it's a struggle for me, and I think it's a struggle for everybody. The voice of our generation tends to sound like wisdom. Whatever it is, you know. If you're a Gen Xer, you probably grew up thinking that the generation before you didn't know anything, it was out of touch. If you are, if you grew up a hippie, hey, never trust anyone over 30, right? I don't know how far back this stretches, but it seems like it stretches back several thousand years. That each generation expects that they're wiser than the generation that came before. I also don't want to idolize former generations. Every generation is full of sinners, right? Every generation has mistakes. But I think that there is something to be said here that the truly good leader will take from the, I'm going to paraphrase Jesus, take from the treasure house both old treasures and new, right? When I talk to pastors who retired, you know, in the 80s, they look at pastoring in this context and they're like, I don't know, or I'm so glad I don't have to deal with those issues. Like, okay, great. So I can't rely fully on their experience. However, people are still people, and I learn a lot from more experienced pastors when they'll sit down and share with me. So it's a both and, right? But Rehoboam's doing what's really easy to do, which is to say, I'm listening to the people who think like me, and I'm going to go with that. So let's see how it worked out. Verse 15. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by God, that the Lord might fulfill his word, which he spoke to Ahijah, the Shilonite, to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. And when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, "What portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Each of you to your tents, O Israel. Look now to your own house, David." So all Israel went to their tents. Right? So everybody left after coming for the coronation and asking for mercy. But Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent to Hadoram, who was the taskmaster over the forced labor, and the people of Israel stoned him to death with stones. And King Rehoboam quickly mounted his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Now, let's go over a little bit of biblical history. Judah is the two southern tribes. Jerusalem is there in the lands of Judah. The other 10 tribes are the northern tribes. Both will be exiled, north first and then south, if I remember properly. They'll all get to return. However, by the time of Jesus, Judah are the Jews. the northern tribes are the Samaritans. Do you remember anything about the relation between the Jews and the Samaritans in the New Testament? They're alienated. Good. What else? How did the Jews feel about the Samaritans?
They were like the lower class.
They looked down on them. They were dirty. They were mixed with other pagan nations. But let's be honest, Solomon did that. Now, it became more pronounced after their exiles, because what happened was when they were taken into exile, part of the methodology was that the conquering nations would pull people out of their homelands, put other captive people in there, so nobody lived in their ancestral homeland. It was kind of to help break down their old national identity and just let their new conquered status be how they identify. So all that mixing happens, right? But what's wild to me is that the Jews so strongly identified as we are the pure ones, we're the good ones, we're the whatever. If you read this story, Judah's the one who's in error. Judah's the one that should be repenting, right? Because it's Rehoboam who's saying, no, I'm going to be cruel to my people. I'm going to whatever, right? And the only reason that Judah is preserved, the only reason, is because God loved David and made a promise to David. That's it. So if you know your history, you would think, boy, Judah should really be moved to repentance. And you would expect that the goal would be a reconciliation, so that all God's people can be united again. But that's not the direction it went. So let's move this forward into salvation history. Jesus shows up on the scene. The rightful king of all of God's people. Born in obscurity, kept secret until the time was right. And when the time was right, the return of the king. And he goes to claim his throne from the stewards who have been keeping it. In this case, Herod. And is the throne turned over to him? The proper rightful son of David? Of course not. The cycle just keeps repeating itself. Those who are meant to shepherd the people of God, their hearts are turned toward themselves and not toward the people of God. But God is faithful to his promises. Brought it up before, but I'll ask again. Is there today an heir of the line of David ruling on the throne that God established? If you hop on an airplane and you fly to Tel Aviv and drive into Jerusalem, or however that works, you won't find him there. But the Lion of the tribe of Judah reigns forever. The shoot from the stump of Jesse reigns forever, exalted on high. Now, when Jesus comes on the scene, does he go only to Judah? Does he do all of his work with the Jews? No. Although he does go there first. But he actually goes to the Samaritans too, and he has no problem with this. And what's beautiful is that his reign extends out even farther than that. So I want you to consider with me, we did the Acts study months ago. Acts chapter 1 was many months ago. But I want you to remember Jesus' words before he ascends. He says to the disciples, I'm sending you to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. The reign of Jesus far exceeds that of Solomon. And even David. That's who we celebrate. So, I'm going to wrap up there. I think that's enough. Unless you guys have any parting questions about this little wrap up to the life of Solomon. Okay. So next week, come with your brain burners. Come with your hard questions. Stuff you always wondered about. Theological questions, Bible questions, whatever it may be. Let's just do it. We're gonna have some fun next week. Just ask away, just open forum, and then after that it's Easter, and we'll start up a new study after Easter. So thank you for coming on this journey with me today. I hope it was a blessing to you. I certainly enjoyed it, and I learned a lot, as always happens when you teach. So stick around. We got church coming up about 15 minutes.